Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our podcast, Being a Speech Language Clinician. Let's see if I could remember the whole thing. I'm cheating, really. I'm checking. I've got it right here in my hand. Things to know, things to be puzzled about, and stories that need to be told. Not only the name of this podcast, but of a book we're working on. And this is episode number 2, The Road Less Traveled, inspired by a poem by Robert Frost. I'm Dr. Nelson Moses, and this is,
Kimberly O. Sam.
and Kimberly, what is the agenda for today?
The agenda for today is kind of to discuss a difficult question. It's kind of a tension, if you will, in what I found before I was even a clinician when I was seeking help for my son. As in order to get him any help, we had to focus on what was wrong with him. That was how you were able to get referrals for the specialist. That's how you were able to get into the room with them. And as a parent, that was hurtful because I knew that there were so many things that he could do, but that wasn't the time to focus on him. We had to get the diagnosis. We had to get the label, so to speak, so that we could get in front of the folks that we were told were going to help him.
Uh-huh. Because that gets at the name of our field, actually. We're traditionally called speech language pathologists. The field is speech language pathology or speech language and hearing. And it has in that title the term pathology, which is defined essentially as disease or extent by extension disorder or disability, something one deals with, but also the term speech and language. And we're going to be using the term languaging here, actually, but it really refers to that part of our title, refers to two behavioral systems, speech and language, which really are about what's on the minds of the people, of us, all of us, and what we're wanting to express. And that's not disability. That's not disorder. That's us. That's human. That's competence. That's what each and every one of us universally are using speech and language for, expressing that. And that is really just the opposite of the pathology. So, where do we go from here?
Well, in my case, it was down the road less traveled. Like we said earlier, it's a reference to Robert Frost. So there were two roads before us. We had to travel that road of the pathology, what's going on. But I knew that that is not a way to raise a child. I wouldn't be raising my son. I would be lowering him. If every single time I'm speaking to someone about him, and of course he was a small child, and so he's there in the treatment room or he's there in the doctor's office, and all he's hearing mom say is what he can't do and what's negative. Necessary to a point, because again, that's what got the diagnosis, that's what got the referrals. But what I had to do was then switch gears and go down the road less traveled, which was, hey, once we're in treatment, once we finished that initial assessment, this is what my son can do. Can you help me build on this? And the way to build it was through the building of language. And what I now more correctly know of is languaging. And so I have come to the realization that as I am now a clinician and I'm practicing, that again, I go down that road very briefly of the pathology side, so to say. I let that inform my treatment, inform what I'm doing, but I very quickly make sure that I go down that road less traveled because that's what the person that you're treating, whose care you're charged with, that's what they're not hearing often enough. What can they do? How can we use what they can do to support these things that got the diagnosis? And I think that that's the road that if we can stay on that, if we can kind of shift the paradigm, if we can get more and more clinicians to focus on that model and not so much that deficit model. And I think it's happening. It just takes more and more folks like us to kind of have the conversation about it so that we're constantly thinking about it. There is another road. It doesn't mean that you don't step onto that first road, but it means that you don't stay there, that we need to make sure that we're sowing into our patients, into our clients, what they can do, building on ability, and making sure that that language that they need to express in that context is something that we're supporting.
Kimberly, is okay if I do a little bit of the professor thing? I just wanted to reiterate a few comments on top of a PowerPoint that I worked hard to make. Was that okay with you?
I thought you'd never ask. Let's go.
I just want to take a couple of minutes to comment on the term languaging that Kimberly just used. It's a term that we will be using to refer to what language, as we see it, is all about. And it's all about encoding in real time content of mind, and that is streams of consciousness that are generated, that come out of our head and ultimately often out of our mouth, where we're expressing intentionality, what we intend to accomplish or do, ideation, ideas about things, emotion, how we're feeling about things in real time. That's what I'm doing right now. Strangely and amazingly enough, I'm having a stream of ideas about this process that we, again, term languaging. Languaging is a process expressed by each and every one of us, and it's expressed by any means possible. By the way, it's expressed to others, but also who do we really speak to most frequently? I say, and if you think about it for a second, you tend to speak to your own self, I think, most frequently, don't you? At least I do. I was up 5 in the morning speaking to myself about things. This morning, managed to get back to sleep for another hour, but still, speech is the most common sensory motor delivery system used by languaging, but there are others, like sign language, communication devices of one sort or another, i.e., technology. We write, type, engage in art forms like music, poetry, really any means possible we use to express what's on our mind. And we presume, by the way, and I really advocate to everybody here that we presume that's done by everybody, beginning with children at a very early age. The, what are the primary functions of languaging? Well, to express to self and others our intentionality and content of mind, our goals, our ideas, our affect, again, how we're feeling. And also, when we speak to our self, as frequently as we do, to engage in thoughtful reflection, very important, and to engage in intersubjectivity, an interesting process, because when we express ourselves to others, especially, we expect others to acknowledge and appreciate our intentionality and content of mind, what we're expressing. Not necessarily agree with us, but to um, recognize our competence, I guess, in our expressions. And as uh, I think Kimberly has expressed, the expression of what's on one's mind is actually a universal human right as expressed in Article 19 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And in our Bill of Rights in the United States, I think it's Article 1. It's very important. It's very important to each and every one of us. And I just wanted to make a few comments on this because the term concept and construct of languaging will be central to what we'll be speaking about here on this podcast and to help our clients, the people who come to us for support because they may be having some difficulty expressing themselves, um, especially outward, is really the primary objective of our work in this field, a very important objective. And in a sense, it's an honor for me to have the opportunity to engage with others in this area. That little lecture I just did on languaging, that would be the 10th version of that. Uh, we started doing it together, Kimberly and I, and then I just said, "Hey, man, this didn't work. It just really got messed up." And I sat down and did another effort, and finally, I got the version you saw. But Kimberly, I know you have a couple of things to say about this, and I want everybody to hear this.
Yeah, because and the one thing I was going to say too is that, and this is how I try to explain it to my patients. I'm like, when they get frustrated when they're trying to relearn how to speak after a stroke or your apraxia folks and those types of things, and I tell them, I said, think about it. I said, you're trying to take something that's uh, digital infinity, quantum infinity, whatever you want to call it, and you're trying to express it using a finite system, which are your articulators here. And so stuff is going to be lost in the translation. It's just like if you say try to translate something from one language to another, and that word, that particular word or concept does not exist in that other language you're translating to. So you have to do the best approximation of it to get the thought across. And so I tell my patients, you have something up here that's defying space, time, and matter. Because everything that you think in your head, if you had to take it and print it out, how many Chicago sized phone books would you have of information? If you take everything that's up here that allows you to be present in the same second that you're 20 years ago thinking about something, yet in the same second in the future thinking about what you're going to do, you're trying to take all of that complexity and put it through a system that is very basic, very finite, the movement of the lips, tongue, teeth, jaw, and some air coming up that's being shaped through that. You're going to have stuff lost in the translation, and that is the frustration. So we help people to express something that's infinite through a finite method as best we can. And so, of course, there's going to be breakdowns. Of course, there's going to be things that are lost. Of course, we're going to be frustrated. However, that doesn't mean we give up on that one modality of expression that we have that to date is pretty much the most efficient, save Elon stuff that he's coming out with that's tapping right into the power structure here. It's tapping right into the control center to maybe help us lose a little bit less in the translation. But by the time the language impacts interacts with the sensory motor system to come out here, we're only maybe capturing 1% of what really is happening here that we're trying to get that other person to see through the emotion, through the intensity of it, through the urgency of it, through the actual words, through the meaning behind the words, through the double meaning behind the word. We're trying to put all that on that communication partner in an instant through something that's finite. And so and that usually helps the patients to kind of back off of the frustration, like, hey, what I try to get them to see is you're doing something really complex. And that's what gets lost is they think I'm doing something simple because they're just thinking about the motor movement part of it. I can't get my tongue in the right place at the right time. I'm like, you're doing something that is, again, quantum infinity, digital infinity, and you're trying to put it down to the finite here to let me know it. You're doing something very complex, and nobody's telling you that. Nobody is telling you about how complex what you are attempting to do is.